Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back. It's 93 degrees in St. Louis today, and it's also after the 4th of July. So to me, that means one thing. It's the dog days of summer here in St. Louis. And other than being sweaty most of the time, the height of summer to me always means a really bountiful garden. Today we're gonna go outside, I'm gonna grab some fresh basil, we're gonna turn it into a really nice, dignified pesto, and then we're gonna turn that into a really easy to make light summer pasta. So stick around, let's get started. So we can't get started on this recipe until we answer one very simple question, which is, what in the H makes a good pesto? This is a simple question, and for me, it comes down to 4 things. Number 1 is fresh, aromatic, very tender, very sweet basil. Number 2 is a high quality, salty, aged cheese like Parmesan or Pecorino, preferably nothing that's pre-ground. That can get a little bit stale. Number 3 is a soft, aromatic nut that's not rancid or stale. And number 4 is real extra virgin olive oil. So to start this pesto, we're gonna preheat a medium-sized saute pan over medium heat. Once we're preheated, we're gonna add 1 tablespoon of a neutral oil and then 100 grams of walnuts. The pan should be hot enough so the walnuts sizzle right away. Once those nuts are sizzling and frying a little bit, we're gonna hit them with a little bit of salt to make them extra savory. After about 2 minutes of frying, our walnuts are gonna start to take on some color. The reason I'm frying these instead of dry roasting them in the oven is the oil here helps the heat penetrate further and faster into the nut, and it brings a little bit of extra fried nutty flavor to the party. Once we see the color start to turn just a little bit light golden brown, we're gonna pull them off the heat and drain them on a paper towel. I'm gonna pop these into the freezer to cool down because making pesto with hot nuts makes brown pesto. A traditional pesto usually calls for pine nuts, and I love pine nuts, but they're really expensive, so I only splurge on those some of the time. For me, the more affordable option is a walnut. It's soft and aromatic like a pine nut, but it's like half the price. Since walnuts are so soft, they break down into the pesto just like a pine nut would. Something like an almond can get a little bit gritty and be a little bit too hard for a great smooth pesto. Okay, so while my nuts are cooling down, we're gonna hop out into the garden and grab the basil we need for this pesto. You'll notice I'm grabbing the leaves from the bottom of the plant, and that's just because my basil's gotten a little bit out of control and is starting to go to seed. The leaves on the tops of plants like this are kind of bitter, they don't have a ton of flavor, and they have almost no perceivable sweetness. When it comes to delicious, height of the season summer basil, you really want the sweetest stuff. So if you have a young plant with tender green leaves, use everything, but if you have a plant like mine, we're looking for the more round, flat leaves. It's just an important detail. We want sweet basil, so if your plants aren't producing delicious basil, don't force it. I highly recommend just going to the store and buying some nice stuff. I don't want you guys to waste your time or your expensive cheese and nuts making pesto out of basil that just doesn't have any flavor. While I'm in the garden, I'm also going to grab some fresh parsley and a bunch of these sun gold cherry tomatoes. If you're not familiar with the sun gold tomato, they're amazing. They have a super long growing season, they're the earliest to ripen, and they're pretty foolproof. I mean that. If you haven't grown anything in your whole life, there's a really good chance that you'll be successful with sun golds. It's a hybrid tomato. Some genius made it up a few years ago. God bless him, because it is very delicious and very easy to grow. We need about 8 to 10 tomatoes per person. Once we've got these tomatoes picked, we're going to head back inside and we're going to keep prepping this pesto. The cheese I'm using today is an aged dry Pecorino. I'm grating this cheese on the finest side of my box grater. It's going to dissolve into the pesto much easier this way. All day we need 100 grams or about 1 cup of ground cheese. If you haven't had a lot of Pecorino, it's a sheep's milk cheese that has a pretty unique piquant flavor that if you aren't into really strong flavored cheeses, a more mild option would be a high quality Parmesan. High quality cheese definitely goes a long way in making a really special pesto. Once we've got that grated, we're gonna scoop it up and set it aside. At this point, we've gathered what we need and our nuts have chilled down enough in the fridge. So I'm gonna grab my food processor and we're gonna spin up this pesto. So into this food processor, I'm gonna measure 100 grams of our fried walnuts, 225 grams of extra virgin olive oil, 30 grams or about 1/8 of a red onion. This one is rinsed under cold water to remove the sulfury stuff, just like we always do. 5 grams of salt, 15 grams of parsley without the stems, 100 grams of sweet fresh basil, and 100 grams of grated Pecorino cheese. I'm gonna pop the top on, we're gonna spin this thing on high to break everything down. I'm gonna give it a full 30 seconds of spinning. We want this whole thing to break down to the point where things are just starting to get homogeneous. This is where it actually becomes saucy. If the pesto is too chunky, it's not gonna grip the pasta later on. So we're going to give it a good spin, and at that point, we're gonna stream in 30 grams of lemon juice. I like to add the acid after the herbs have been broken down and emulsified into the oil, just because I think it helps preserve the color. I can't say there's any science to that, but I've had some brown pestos in my past when I add lemon juice right up front. Once the lemon juice is streamed in, now it's time to taste. This is a good time to adjust the acidity or the salt. If you're happy with the seasoning, we're gonna set it in the fridge to chill out while we finish the rest of this dish. We just made 4 generous servings of pesto, and that's gonna keep in the fridge for a day or two, but it loses its magic and freshness pretty quick, so try and use it up relatively quickly if you're not making 4 pastas today. Like I mentioned before, we're gonna be using this pesto to dress up some pasta. Of course, that's gonna start with bringing about 3 to 4 quarts of water to a boil. I've been messing around lately with what I would call nicer Italian dried pastas. This one is a spaghetti alla carbonara. It's a really cool shape that's cut with a wire instead of a bronze die. And instead of being a round pasta shape, it's actually a square. I find that spaghetti alla carbonara holds slippery sauces like pesto really well because it has a rough edge and some grooves on the side. This pasta has a really nice chew and some great rich semolina flavor. Today I'm cooking just one portion of this pasta, or 4 ounces total. Lauren is gluten-free and she gets her own special blend of gluten-free pasta in separate non-glutened water. But once my water's at a boil, I'm gonna season it generously with salt, and then we're gonna drop in the pasta and cook per the package instructions, which in this case is about 9 to 10 minutes. We're of course gonna stir the pasta to break it up a little bit so it doesn't stick together while it's simmering. And I do want to mention that this dish is going to be served pretty much room temperature, so we're going to be cooking the pasta a little bit further than al dente. Pasta tends to firm up a little bit when it cools down, so we're going to take that into account and just add a little bit more time. After that 9 to 10 minute mark, we're going to taste the pasta just to make sure that we like the texture. Again, we're going past al dente. We don't want snappy, crunchy noodles in this situation. Once we're happy with where it's at, we're going to strain it off and flip that pasta into a medium-sized bowl with about 2 to 3 tablespoons of the cooking liquid. I'm going to let this sit here for about 3 to 4 minutes to cool off until it's no longer hot. Once the pasta is cooled off to the point where it's just warm, we're gonna finish off this dish. So grab the pasta bowl and the pesto from the fridge and fold in about 4 tablespoons of that pesto. Since this dish is all about the pesto, we're gonna be really generous. Once the pesto's in there, we're gonna give the whole thing a toss to get things mixed and whipped up. The starch from the pasta is gonna combine with the water and the pesto to create a really creamy sauce that's gonna cling to the noodle in a really pleasant way. If things are looking a little bit dry in the bowl, just a splash of tap water can bring everything back. Once you've got it toss for a good 30 seconds, we're gonna taste a noodle. If you want a little bit more acid or salt or cheese, anything like that, now would be a good time to change that. If it's balanced and bright and just screams the height of summer, it's time to plate. So that's a really easy, light summer pasta that's definitely gonna get you guys through the dog days of summer ahead. To me, it's just a really great way to celebrate the summer garden. This dish makes sense as a side or as an entree. You can put a little bit of chopped grilled chicken on there maybe, a little bit of shrimp. Shrimp and pesto tastes good. Anyways, if you guys like this video, please consider giving it a like down below. That goes a long way in helping us be seen by more people on YouTube. As always, thank you guys so much for sticking around. Thank you for your time and attention, and we'll see you next time.